In the early 1980s, when there were demonstrations of hundreds of thousands of people against the sighting of American cruise missiles in this country, one clear, powerful voice was heard again and again.
It is an enormous demonstration of refusal to accept any further missiles, weapons in this country. It's a demand for a step towards a more peaceful world. We'll make it stick.
That was Bruce Kent speaking at a campaign for nuclear disarmament demonstration in Hyde Park in 1983. The veteran anti-nuclear and anti-war campaigner has died after a short illness at the age of 92. To pay tribute to him, we're joined by the General Secretary of the CND, Kate Hudson. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
A sad day for anti-nuclear campaigners who haven't just looked to Bruce Kent for a lead, but I imagine have stood with him on marches at demonstrations for much of your adult life.
Absolutely. And to be honest, we're pretty devastated. And obviously his passing is a profound loss for the peace movement, but we think very much for wider society as well. He was active in many issues beyond the nuclear issue. He had a very strong vision, driven by his faith that another and better world is possible and that we can all help make that change through our actions. So he was almost the embodiment of an active and engaged citizen. And of course, as you say, at times he was also a really great leader, particularly in the 1980s when he took the movement forward in the struggle against cruise missiles.
He was often referred to as Monsignor Bruce Kent, a retired Catholic priest. How important was faith to explaining his passion for the peace movement?
Oh, it was really at the core of everything that he did. When it came to nuclear weapons, he saw them as immoral. He saw that the deterrence theory is based on a willingness to commit mass murder, and that was completely against the core of his faith. But he also had a very radical vision of peace in the faith context, and this was very much shaped by his experience in the 1960s when he visited India and Biafra. He saw the impact of the war there, the impact of Western weapons, and when he came back, that was almost a turning point for him and helped shape his work going forward, which, by the way, included opposition to the arms trade. He was very active in prisoner support. He was active in support of Palestinian rights and UN reform. You know, he had a very rounded and radical understanding of peace and human rights and social change.
For a campaigner like him, there's always another campaign to fight, always another struggle to be involved in. But did he reflect on the fact that that campaign, the campaign for nuclear disarmament, ultimately failed in his lifetime?
Well, no, obviously we wouldn't agree with that assessment, Nick. And of course, his great engagement with CND was building the movement against cruise missiles. And of course, that whole political and social and campaigning ferment in the 1980s contributed to the removal of those missiles. By 1991, intermediate range nuclear missiles were gone from Britain, and they were gone from Europe.
That's interesting that you think and he thought that the campaign succeeded, because you'll know there's an alternative view of the history, which is that was Reagan and Thatcher standing up to the Soviet Union at the time, and then reached agreement about disarmament, and that the protest didn't have much effect.
Well, things happen at the top, but in the 1980s, that massive groundswell of popular movement, hundreds of thousands active in Britain, millions across Europe and elsewhere in the world, that helped shape society, and it helped create the framework for leaders wanting to bring about change, which of course included Gorbachev too. You know, that helped to shape that change and bring about that change in attitude towards nuclear weapons. And of course, the subsequent massive reductions in nuclear weapons. So that people power, you know, people engaging for good, which was so much at the heart of Bruce's vision, that did bring about change.
Tributes there to Bruce Kent, who's died at the age of 92, from Kate Hudson, General Secretary of CND. Thank you for joining us.